we're already on the screen. I forgot to take you all off. Hello, welcome to Insight, which has already got to a fantastic start. I'm your host, head of news, Ian Makungu, he, him. Insight is Raw News' premier news show, where we discuss all the biggest matters of the week with Warwick students, and we get to see their opinions on all the biggest stories off and on campus. This week we're going to be discussing, of course, the biggest event of last week, and probably maybe of this year, the inauguration of Joe Biden, and how exactly his first week is going. We're also going to talk about more student issues, particularly the Warwick Red Strike, and what how the panel feels about that. We have a mixture of people who are currently on campus at the student accommodation and are still at home. We're also going to discuss what's next for universities. This week, for a lot of speculation about when universities are going to go in future. We've had some universities considering dropping lectures altogether. We've had some UCAS have been discussing changing how they do admissions to maybe move after A-level results. And also, I think Gavin Williams went out today and said that we should maybe fund media studies less and engineering more. And I want to hear what you think about the latest front in the humanities versus art versus STEM war. Arts war. What am I talking about? But more, before we get into any of that, it's time to introduce my wonderful, wonderful panel, starting with Andrew. Andrew, welcome to the stream.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Andrew, second year general engineering and they, them pronouns.
So, Andrew, you're currently on the engineering SSLC. I hope I said that correctly. I can't remember what it's called. Yeah. So, what are you guys working on right now?
So, right now, we're considering it's basically moving exams a bit earlier into term 3. And then that way, students, if they wish, and if it's safe to do so, they can come in after the exams in term 3 and do like formative, hands-on practical stuff. Because if you're studying engineering, you need to know how to do some practical stuff. And if you spend your first year at university just doing theoretical, like online lectures, you just want a taste of the good stuff, basically.
Yeah. Well, so obviously I don't know engineering. I don't know how, I'm not into all that kind of stuff. But what's your sort of message to engineering students right now who are sort of maybe feeling worried they're not getting the full extent of their degree?
Just hold on tight. The department is completely aware of the concerns. Like, I think every department in the university wants people to have that face-to-face experience, but they want it to be safe at the same time. So they're in it for the students. They're not in it for themselves.
Yeah. Now, going from someone doing what Gavin Williams consider a worthy degree, someone doing one that's not so much. Scott, welcome to the stream.
Hi, Enoch. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Scott, Andrew, do you guys want to start the humanities STEM war right now, or should we save that for later on the show?
Unless you want.
Okay. No. Whenever you're ready.
Yeah. So, Scott, obviously you study history and politics, correct? Just like
that's
me.
right. Yeah.
How is that going in sort of this online year?
Well, not too bad. I mean, I don't know how you found it, but I found a lot of the library resources are available online. I've been very lucky, I think, in that I've had some very good lecturers, module conveners who've been pretty available for most of the time and have adapted quite well to online teaching. So I personally have had quite a good experience with it. It helps that I'm living in quite a big student house as well, so I don't have too many problems with getting lonely. But
I can see you living in a student house just from the decor.
Yeah, they're not all mine, I should say.
Of course.
Yeah, I promise.
We believe you. And now someone who's new to the show, but also not new to the news scene here around Warwick. We welcome a Board News deputy, Eden. Eden, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, well, please, don't let me.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I think I agree with Scott when he says that it's probably easier as a second or third year student studying humanities subject. You've already had like 1 or 2 years where you've sort of engaged in the sort of in-person subject and sort of like the experience of that. But as a fresher, I think it's quite different, because I have no idea what the in-person experience is.
Let's talk about that a bit then. How, as a fresher, what is your experience like?
It's very, you use the word like lonely. Well, I wouldn't call it lonely. I use the word isolated, because it is quite isolated. I'm at the learning grid right now because I find it difficult to view online lectures in my own room. And obviously, like going to the learning grid, it's like the time when I can see other people, not getting anywhere near them, obviously, because that's against the rules and stuff. But it's a very different experience, and I think it's very hard to describe it in a couple of words. I think you'd have to experience it to sort of truly understand.
I don't think anything's ever been truer than that. But we welcome on, I think, someone who knows a bit more about doing humanities. Probably we have a third year here. Arthur, welcome to the stream.
Hello.
So Arthur, you're a third year history. What's history and politics, I believe?
PPE, not history and politics.
Okay.
Come on.
Well, PPE, various subject. So Arthur, then looking back at all three of your years at Warwick, what do you think your entire experience has been like? Obviously, there's been strikes. There's also been COVID. Do you feel like you've got your money's worth here?
I've got to be quite honest. I think a lot of people asking for refunds are being slightly facetious. I think we're actually getting more value for money. Now it's all online now than we were before. Especially for me, I'm not good at getting up in the morning, so I missed quite a few contact hours in first and second year. But as soon as everything goes online, there's no issues whatsoever, because you just roll out of bed and join your seminar. So it's been quite right, actually. I'm probably one of the few people who prefers the all online system to going onto campus, and also Teams is quite functional. So yeah, I'm not particularly upset.
All right. Oh, I hope you don't mind if I quote you on that. Arthur. So I think that's an interesting perspective on this. The idea that obviously, we hear a lot of people who are very upset to be now all online, but you never hear the that side of the argument. Actually, maybe online learning does work better. Online learning does work better for people. That's something that's very interesting. We'll discuss that a bit more later on in the show. But my final guest, last but never least, is Head of Arts here at Raw, Charlie.
I'm also a STEM student, so I'd much rather have in contact personnel. I hate being online. It's just so much content. For example, I never missed a lecture when it was online. I went to campus and all that stuff. Everything was there, contact was right. Then now I'm doing it from my home, from my bedroom. I literally finished the module I was meant to finish in week 6 of last term yesterday. So I'm much behind. I think harder to be in person. It was a lot more social. I'm a very social person, but being in my bedroom just studying is for Microsoft. How about?
Yeah, well, Charlie, I imagine online learning is harder with mic like that, so we'll come back to it in just a second. But I want to start with one of the biggest issues facing students on campus, something that's provoked a lot of passion around campus. Hopefully, we'll provoke that passion in the panel as well. Warwick rent strike. Up and down the country, we're seeing students engaging in rent strikes, saying that because under new lockdown rules, they're not allowed to return to university accommodations, whether that's university owned or privately owned, and so they want some sort of rent rebate. We've seen it happen on campus, but now they want it for more accommodation more widely. Pam, I want to ask, what do you think about the rent strike? We'll start with you, Andrew.
Well, I don't study law, so I can't really talk about the legal aspects of it. And I can completely understand why people who are paying for accommodation that they can't enter, of course you're going to want your money back because they're not providing the service that they should be. And I guess if it's Warwick-owned accommodation, they might have a chance at getting some of it back. But if you have like a private landlord, it's just going to turn into like a legal battle. And yeah, I mean, I guess if you get enough people, probably have a chance of getting the sort of rent rebated or whatever. But I can't really say anything further than that.
Oh, Andrew, always a man who very cagey legal details. Eden, I'll come to you. What do you think about the rent strike?
Yeah, I agree with the premise. I think legally it does make sense that if you're not on campus, perhaps you shouldn't be paying your rent, especially because we're not actually legally supposed to be on campus if you do have a place in the UK to live, obviously. But I think there needs to be more of a push for tuition fee refunds, personally. I don't really agree with Arthur in the sense that online lectures are sort of more beneficial, and I do think that like the standard of online lectures compared to the standard of in-person lectures is like comparatively lower. So I think although like we have heard back from Warwick about the rent waiver, I think there needs to be more of a push for perhaps like a larger safety net or sort of something a comment by the uni or the student union to say that it definitely is lower in terms of standards this year. I'd like to see that happen.
Yeah, well, Arthur, I want to come straight to you then. What do you think? Firstly, what do you think of the rent strike? But also, what you had to say to Eden in response?
On the rent strike, I think if a uni has a policy where students living, who are on campus, who can't come back onto campus, so I've jumbled up the wording there, but I think it's a good policy to give refunds if the unis are literally preventing you from coming onto campus. But I mean, obviously, the law is one thing, but I mean, not to say any names, I know quite a few people who have returned to their university off-campus accommodations for the term, even if it's like nominally prevented by the law. So I think the case for a refund there might be more tenuous. And on the point of lecture quality dropping, I think I know because most of my modules are philosophy, and I know what the philosophy department is. They have an online lecture which they post on Moodle, and then every week they have an asynchronous lecture, which is different from a seminar where the module tutor does a 1 hour Q&A. So you get the online lecture, then you get the Q&A session, then the seminar. So I think they've counteracted the problem quite well. And I think at least with that department, I feel like they have a solution which actually kind of gives you more value if you consider it as an aggregate compared to having just one lecture and one seminar. Although I am aware that not all the humanities departments are doing that, and they should, because it's a good arrangement. Like, I think politics isn't doing it.
Yeah, well, Scott, I want to come to you as someone who I know is currently still at university accommodation. What do you think about the rent strike? And also, what do you think about Arthur saying there about the fact we're still getting value for money?
I tend to agree more with Eden, I think, than Arthur. As much as I've been coping quite well with online learning, I don't think it's quite the full value for money that you get, from face-to-face learning. Although I do see the argument for basically getting more as an aggregate from extra Q&As and that sort of thing. I don't think that going back to face-to-face teaching sort of would prevent getting more out of your education in that way. A sort of, I suppose, post-COVID, a mixed approach seems to be the way forward. But in terms of rent strikes, obviously, as you say, I'm back at my accommodation, so I get much more animated by sort of the talk about tuition fees and accounting for the value lost there than I do about rent strikes. I think that's probably a better place to start, that more students can get on board with than the tricky issue of rent strikes.
Well, I'll put this question to people watching at home. What do you think? Do you want tuition fee refunds? Do you support the rent strike? Please comment in and tell us. Andrew, you work with the engineering department. Do you think, in terms of the stuff they put out this term, it's been worth it in terms of for students?
I mean, it's difficult to say because there's a lot of time and effort going into producing the online materials, but obviously if it's the first year doing this, some of them might not be, let's just say, as high quality as they would be during a regular year. I know that the people working in the department have been working really hard, and they definitely say that we'd be getting our money's worth. I think personally, if I had more face-to-face stuff, I'm having my first ever seminar next week, like I never had one before for engineering, then yeah, it probably would have been that same kind of value. It's tricky to say because I agree with Arthur, rolling out of bed and being able to join like a lecture or something is really good. But at the same time, you need to have that collaboration between people. You need to ask your friends questions about like difficult content, and it's not really there this year. Yeah.
Well, Charlie, I want to come to you now. You do life sciences, correct? That's it's a very involved subject. Do you feel like you've gotten your value for money this year? And Charlie's still muted. Okay, I think we might come back to Charlie in just a bit. So we've, in terms of the rent strike, we've seen a lot on campus. The university has said we are going to do a rebate, 5-week rebate until lockdown's over. Potentially more, hopefully more if the lockdown continues. off campus has been the real issue people are having. So I want to come to you. Should the university do more for off-campus students who can't come back to their accommodations, even if it's not a registrar, even if it's not so much a rent rebate? Let's go to well, Scott. You're at your accommodation. Let's go to you, Arthur.
I mean, in an abstract ideal world, sure they should, but ultimately, I think. This was hinted at in our kind of pre-stream discussion, but I think, especially say for example, if like a landlord has like one or two properties from main source of income, that kind of situation could end up being quite problematic. While the university, obviously, it's got thousands of students paying them $9,000 a year and loads of a huge surplus and loads of assets. So asking them for a refund isn't as big of a deal. I mean, I'm with Warwick accommodation, so I'd have expected that it'd be easy to get a refund from them. But I know some of the people in my house have gone back to uni already. Well, I'm staying at home for a bit. So I mean, again, there's if a government policy was strictly no one can go back to uni unless you're, say, a foreign student, for example, then I think that'd be a much stronger case. But because we're in a kind of ambiguous, weak enforcement kind of zone in terms of where the lockdown policy is, I don't think like kind of widespread kind of private sector accommodation refunds are really that feasible.
Yeah. Well, in light of all this, do we think the fact that Warwick accommodation is sort of curtailing their off-campus offerings from next year is a sort of a good idea? Eden, I'm going to come to you. How are you finding trying to find a house for next year? Obviously, being a freshman in this current situation.
Yeah, luckily I have found a house, and I'm actually living with my flatmate because it's quite hard to meet new freshers on campuses. But it was quite difficult finding a house. First, because we didn't have any in-person viewings, so we very much chose our house on the basis of a 360 sort of live stream of what the house looked like, and we also saw like comments from other people who lived there, and they sort of gave it a review. But yeah, it's very different this year, and it does feel sort of surreal to sort of be living in a house that I haven't actually seen. It's not a very nice house, I'm going to be very honest. So there was such a rush this year. I think a lot of people that I knew had found a house and found a group of people to live with by October. And it wasn't really I think this term the uni sent out basically like a finding a house 101 sort of tutorial that the student union was going to do. And I don't think anyone I know is going to be interested in that, because we've all had to sort of deal with it individually. We've all had to sort of contact the real estate and everything like that. So,
well, you've mentioned the student union there, so I think let's end this section by talking about that. Do you think the SU can do more, either in support of the rent strike or demanding more from the university in terms of tuition fee rebates or rent rebates? I won't risk it by going back to you, Charlie, just yet. So let's go to you instead, Scott.
Well, I always think the SU can do more, which is probably, I'm quite cynical about the union. But I always find that maybe they don't have enough animus behind them, enough sort of fire in their belly, as it were, in support of students. So I think they should really go after, be bold, go after some more radical concessions. Even if they don't get them, that's what they're there for.
Yeah. Andrew, what do you think?
There's probably a lot of things the SU wants to do, but I feel like their hands are probably tied by whoever's above them, whoever's managing it. I know it's separate from the university, but at the end of the day, everyone kind of has the inkling that there's something going on there that stops them from doing exactly this kind of stuff. I don't know, maybe an overhaul of the SU. Everyone's probably seen the Facebook comments where it's like, no one likes you, resign. Yeah.
Well, and finally, let's go one last try. Charlie.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Oh,
yes.
Fantastic. We can hear you.
Thank goodness. The SU should do more. It's clear it's quite a privatised institution nowadays. When my stepmother was at university, they said the SU was a lot more proactive in terms of being for the students, but clearly it has a bit more of an agenda now. It can't really do as much as it can because more than just like all these students. It has other links to other companies and other ties. But yes, I do think they should just support the students more. They should have more of an active sort of role in trying to get ranked strikes, especially for Warwick campus and Warwick accommodation students, because that's probably the easiest one to do. Private landlords are kind of a much trickier situation. They can't really be done at all. So yeah.
Well, let's move away from the current crisis for universities. Let's turn towards the future. Over the last few weeks, we've had a lot of discussion about what's next for universities, what's next for the whole system. And I want to talk to the people at the panel here about what they sort of see the future universities being. I've had some universities either float or say when they're going to start getting rid of lectures as something you attend from next year. They're going to keep the online current system or integrate them more with seminars. Who am I going to come to first? Ida, I'll come to you first. As a freshman who's obviously you never really experienced a normal lecture. What do you think about this idea?
I think one of the frustrations that I had this year was that although for a brief period I did have in-person seminars. I think I attended 3 in-person seminars and all my lectures have been online. And I think it's quite difficult because a lot of the online lectures that I watch, the professors at the beginning always say, well, if this was in person, I would do this and I'd act out certain scenarios. And because I studied law, I studied PPL, so the majority of my law lectures are quite sort of laid back and very much like if we were in person we would be doing this. And I think that is one of the things that I have missed out on. And I think in the future I think that universities will adopt a blended style of learning, and as people call this the new normal, and it is sort of frustrating to miss out on this personally.
Yeah. Well, then let's go from someone who's experienced too little of it, someone who's had probably too much. Arthur, what do you think about this plan to move lectures online?
Yeah, I mean, I've already said I don't mind. I mean, again, I feel like it very much varies on subject to subject basis, as Eden was just saying. Her law lectures seem to be kind of more involved. But from almost all of my politics and philosophy lectures I had, I mean, economics, we don't talk about that. But for my politics and philosophy lectures, there wasn't, at least I don't remember any scenario sitting in my lectures where I thought this couldn't be online. Like, I think, especially if you have the asynchronous lectures. I mean, honestly, what maybe is a somewhat radical idea, but maybe, if the most efficient way to do it would just be for going forward, make like pure humanities courses like philosophy be more blended and online just generally in the future, and maybe cut the tuition fee even, while you could have for more like involved courses like I don't know, engineering or biology, they should kind of keep the offline learning format once COVID finishes. But even that said, I mean, we have the vaccines rolling out slowly, but who's to say that next year we'll even have a full solution to the COVID crisis? What if there's a new variant and we need a whole new set of vaccines to sort it out? I think I don't feel like, come next year we'll just have a return to normal already. I think we're in for a longer haul of kind of COVID-induced disruption than we might expect.
Arthur, you took the words right out of my mouth. Charlie, I want to come to you as a resident biologist. Should we be ready for the long haul crisis?
Pardon?
Should we be ready for a long haul crisis here with in terms of online learning?
Yes, definitely. There's not obviously the vaccine rollout is great, but even if the first 4-tier top, like the most priority groups are vaccinated by mid-February, there's still the entirety of the rest of the population, and then the coronavirus is never going to go away. There's not really a cure for it. So there's a lot more mitigation that needs to be done in terms of making areas a lot safer. And the university, I think students and their wealth and like the sort of safety are at the bottom of the list. So until like there's enough in place to say, okay, it's safe to come back and do lectures now, it's safe to come do your seminars, it's safe to come do labs, it's going to be essentially online with all like the precautions in place. It'll be, I imagine the 2021-2022 year will at least have like half of it being online, being like sort of generous. It's definitely going to be here for at least a couple of years. There's no way that we can't not do that, I think.
Okay. cheery and optimistic from Charlie there. Let's come to you, Scott. What do you think? How do you feel about online lectures?
I agree with Arthur that the lectures certainly online, a lot of them are basically the same quality, if not better, as the in-person ones. I think what a lot of, well, no, I suppose maybe I'm projecting that. Certainly what I valued the most was in-person small group seminars. And I think you do lose something about those and the quality of discussion and debate for humanities at the very least by having them online rather than in person. And but no, I think in future, basically, again, agree with Arthur that a mixed approach is the best way, possibly with options to cut fees. It's worth, lots of students, I do think, feel that way. At the beginning, there are plenty of online university courses, and yet in-person teaching for the last decade has remained, traditional universities have remained the most popular form of higher education. So there's definitely still demand for it.
Yeah, maybe it's a crossover point. Now, another big thing that's happened in terms of universities is, of course, UCAS has discussed changing when you apply, changing when you receive university offers to after you receive A-level results. I want to come to you first, Eden. Obviously, you had a nightmare A-level season, I presume, last year. What do you think about this idea?
I'm actually for this because I think it's it sort of makes the process a little bit more transparent. I think it would, in my opinion, I think it does reduce sort of anxiety levels for students, because when you do apply for unis, you do know if you're going to get in, because a lot of time with UCAS, even if you have the predicted grades, you don't actually know if the uni is going to accept you. And I think once you've actually got those grades, you're more likely to be less anxious about the results and less anxious about the future. And I did see something in the news the other day. So it's interesting that we're making 16 and 17-year-olds choose a degree that's going to sort of set them on a life path, or make such a life-changing decision at the age of 16 or 17. I think this decision to sort of apply for universities much later in the process is sort of going to have a large impact on what students actually choose as a degree, perhaps. Because once you get your results, you actually know what you've done well in, whereas predicted grades often inflated, sort of often, as we saw in the U-turn, but predicted grades are often inflated and often sort of set you on a path. Especially for me, I received the grades to go to another uni, but I decided to go to Warwick because I thought that the extracurriculars were much better than the uni I'd chosen. And I think it does sort of change the way in which you perceive your uni experience, definitely.
Yeah, well, I hope even in these dark pandemic times that extracurriculars are delivering. At least I hope this is good. I hope there's anything else. My predicted grades were actually inflated when I was at uni school, because I had dyspraxia, so I was terrible at exams. My school was like, well, we can't actually give you this predicted grade, but we'll inflate it anyway. I ended up here. So maybe that's a warning, I suppose, to all children out there. Don't get your grades inflated or end up somewhere you're hopefully unqualified for. I want to come to you, Andrew. What do you think about this whole process? This new idea from UCAS to move it after exams?
I think it's a really good idea, and obviously operationally getting people to finish their exams sort of around the start of summer, and then process all of those applications before university starts, late September, early October. It's going to be difficult. There's a reason this takes as much time as it does, but at the same time, as Eden said, making that decision in year 12 about what kind of degree you want to study, it's just insane, I think, because you've only done 1 year of your A-levels. You haven't even experienced like a taste of what's to come. But for some reason, you're making these huge decisions without a lot of supporting information. And my advice, if anyone is still in sixth form, I don't know if this is good advice or not, but I wish I'd taken like a gap year and gone, okay, what do I actually want to do? What am I actually good at? And what kind of direction do I want to take myself in the next 3 to 4 years?
And also, if you're still in sixth form and you're watching a university news show, why? Please explain. Please comment along and just tell me. Not in a mean way. I just want to know. I guess this brings us on to our final topic in this sort of segment of conversation. The university minister recently said that they believe that we should stop funding pointless degrees like media studies and humanities and start funding useful ones like engineering and STEM. I can already see Charlie smiling away at that. Don't they'll start with humanities and they'll go after you in life sciences. That's the most wishy-washy thing I've ever heard. Scott, I want to come to you as a fellow die-hard humanities student. What do you think of this?
Well, actually, I feel like a bit of a traitor because I don't fully agree with that, but I do.
Well, then let's take you off air. Then I'm not having.
I do have. I do sympathise with the idea that STEM subjects are not more useful, but certainly in much greater demand at the moment. So I don't know. I think there are too many. There's an argument that there are too many humanities degrees and not enough jobs which require them, and the other way around for STEM students. So,
well, I guess the question is, Scott, what are you doing?
I'm a degree traitor. I don't know. The question, what am I doing? I'm not clever enough to do a STEM subject. Is the honest answer. Yeah.
All right. Well then, Charlie, I guess we'll have to come back to you. What do you think?
It's a bit of a mixed bag because I reliably know most of the graduates from the last year of my life science department didn't actually end up being a scientist. They all went and did something else because they decided they hated the degree. So having a drive towards only fund STEM degrees might be good for the economy. It's also good for research and stuff like that. But it will lead to a lot of students who are like, I shouldn't have done this degree. I actually hate it. I want to do English instead. So having the disincentive to do a subject someone actually likes, it's just it'll make you more employable, but it won't really make you much happier. I know that for a fact that I probably won't end up being a scientist after I finish my degree. I don't hate my degree, but I have a mixed emotions with it. I'd much rather gone and done a much more humanities degree, and I wouldn't have appreciated everyone shoving be a scientist down my throat from the age of 16.
Okay, so 2 degree traitors there. It all balances out. Everything is now equal once again. Eden, you can be a tiebreaker. What do you think?
Well, I am inclined to feel offended by the government's remarks about my degree, but I agree with Scott that STEM subjects are obviously in demand, but I disagree that we should be disincentivizing students to take humanities degrees. I think STEM and humanities degrees prepare students in very different ways. But like on a sort of separate note, I think there should be more of an emphasis on vocational degrees, perhaps. There's been like a large increase in students who leave sixth form and study vocational degrees at vocational colleges, and I think the government said something early on in the pandemic about people shouldn't, nowadays getting a degree isn't as valuable as it was 20 or 30 years ago, and I think it's very obvious, obviously, in the current graduate market, and there needs to be more of an emphasis on sort of not getting a degree, perhaps, because paying £9,000, let's be honest, for like a YouTube subscription, in my opinion, is not really worth it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's not only a YouTube subscription, they have better graphics. We have had a comment in. Jacob says STEM for life, and if you could spell life, Jacob, I would take you seriously. Now, we'll move on quickly from universities because I have one, I think probably our last topic of today, and let's be really breeze through it. Joe Biden is President of the United States of America. I like everyone to sit that for a moment. A day I never thought would come when I say Joe Biden is President of the United States of America. But here we are, almost a week in Joe Biden's America. How do we think he's doing? Let's go around, starting with you, Andrew. How do you think Joe Biden's doing?
Oh God, where do I begin? This whole election thing has just been banging on for ages, and apparently he got elected months ago, and then he's only been inaugurated this week. I'm just glad it's over, to be honest, because obviously America's got such an influence over what happens in the world that I hope it goes for the best. But I have family who live in America, and one of them's just posting on Facebook every day. Either he's happy with it, he's unhappy with it. Just get these. Okay, I can't say that. Just get your stuff together. And,
what were you gonna say? I mean, don't say it, but I'm just messing with that later. Eden, what do you think?
I think I'm quite impressed with his endeavour so far. I think he's trying to vaccinate 100 million people in the first 100 days of his presidency, and I think he's also rejoining the Paris Climate, and he's trying to rejoin think it's WHO, which is sort of promising, obviously. And I think most of his presidency is going to be sort of not undoing a lot of Trump's presidency. So I think in terms of efficiency, I think he's going to have a little bit of trouble sort of proposing actual legislation that puts forward his ideas rather than proposing legislation that undoes a lot of Trump's ideas.
Yeah. Scott, I'll come to you. How's he doing?
Yeah, quite reasonably well and entirely predictable, really. As Eden says, he's already started undoing some of the more damaging elements of the Trump presidency. I think about a third of the executive orders he's signed so far have been direct sort of U-turns from the Trump administration. Very sort of middle of the road, moderate cabinet appointments. I think his Secretary of State's being confirmed today. And it was quite a good inauguration speech with a couple of hiccups, but on the whole, first 5 days are going pretty well.
Yeah. Encouraging. Charlie.
Yeah, exactly the same. He's doing pretty well. He's pretty much doing a good job at undoing everything Trump has done. But yeah, I agree with Eden. Doing his own things might be a bit more difficult. He might face a bit more opposition. But so far, it's been a breath of fresh air seeing everyone in America just relax a little bit, knowing that the country's in a lot more of a safe pair of hands. But I guess the storming of the Capitol might show there's still like quite a lot of unrest with the Trump supporters and might lead to some difficulties later down the road if Trump likes to be vocal.
Yes, as he mentioned, not everyone in America is relaxed quite yet. We'll come to you, Arthur.
Two things. First, the coverage in the liberal press has been absolutely nauseous. Like, yeah, it's a good thing Trump's out of office, but like reading the Washington Post or like just seeing CNN just worshipping him, it's like, oh my God. The whole kind of liberal narrative is that Fox News worshipped Donald Trump like he was some North Korean dictator / God. And now they're reproducing the exact same thing. I mean, Biden's all right, but he's not. He's not an incredible candidate. His speech wasn't that amazing. It was something which I think anyone here could have written easily. But he says, "I'm going to unite the country," blah blah blah. It's fantasy. You're not going to unite the country. That aside, the second point I have to say is, I heard apparently, now this is just like reports, it might be unsubstantiated, but apparently, the Joe Biden's team, they had no idea they were going to win in Georgia. And as a result, they didn't prepare much legislation to bring to the floor. For example, the $2,000 checks, which they promised so aggressively in the run-up to the Georgia Senate runoffs. Why not put the $2,000 stimulus check on the floor? The House voted for it. Trump said he was for it. Biden and the two Georgia Senate candidates both said, we're going to pass $2,000 checks as soon as we get into office. Republicans are the ones blocking it. And now they're in office, they're doing nothing. Instead, I've heard that the first kind of major piece of legislation they're bringing is immigration legislation, which is probably the worst possible thing you could do at this time. The Republican Party is a shambles. Like, it has no future. Trump's completely destroyed it. And now they're probably doing the one thing which could unite Republican Party that's tearing itself apart. Instead of, if they brought the stimulus checks right now to the floor, say like tomorrow, they would put the Republican senators in a very difficult position, and it would probably not only exacerbate the divisions in that party, but also it could be a good bipartisan win for the Biden administration right at the start, which I think could be set the agenda going forward, especially after Joe Biden has made such a momentous element of his program being bipartisan, return to normalcy. Instead, I personally think that, I personally take the Democratic position on the immigration debate, but starting out with immigration legislation is probably one of the most divisive policies you could push through Congress, and it probably won't pass. And, one last thing, but I believe they're waiting until March to bring their stimulus legislation to the floor. And even then, they will need 60 votes to get it through. To block a filibuster. It's not going to happen. I think, again, there's a lot of, it's good that Trump's out of office, but the kind of the fantastical and zealous rhetoric in part of a lot of the main media institutions is kind of distracted from the practical failures we are seeing and which we will see going forward. And I think based on what we're seeing, things aren't boding particularly well.
I think my understanding of the $2,000 checks is they're trying to do it for the budget committee and the reconciliation bill, which I think only needs 51 votes to pass.
Well, they're not. I believe their main strategy at the moment is to go with just a normal 60-vote piece of legislation in March, which probably won't pass. If they just did the $2,000 checks on their own, they put a lot of pressure on the Republicans, especially like Marco Rubio and Josh Hawley, who already said, we will vote for the $2,000 checks.
I was reading an interview with Bernie Sanders, who's the incoming budget committee chair. I'm going to minimize you so we not just look at your face while we're arguing. I read an interview from Bernie Sanders, incoming budget chair committee, and he said that his plan was if the Ghost Republicans failed this week, they're going to bring it into reconciliation bill and hopefully have it in place and distributed from either as of circulating, the checks as in being sent to people by March. That's the hope. I think by March was the hope they had. So clearly, a lot of I was about to say mixed feelings, but a lot positive and one very negative feeling about Joe Biden going around currently. So let's leave Joe Biden for a second. Let's talk a bit more about Donald Trump and what he's going to do next. We've had lots of things floating around that either he's going to start a new political party, the Patriot Party, or he's going to launch Trump TV. But Donald Trump he's gone very suspiciously quiet in his time out of office. Scott, I want to come to you. What do you think Donald Trump should do next?
What do I think he should do next? I can't say on air, but I think he won't start. It's very unlikely he'll start a third political party. It would be very misguided. I mean, third parties don't do well in America, and if he does, it'll destroy the GOP at the next election probably. Will he will he get convicted of the impeachment? I don't know. Probably not. Will he run again? I don't know if there's a lot of sort of speculation, and that's all it really is of whether he really wants to get back into sort of electoral politics. I suspect his heart is really in media and TV. That's what he loves. That's what he's good at. So he'll probably maybe not start a channel or get involved in an existing channel and get his own talk show. But I don't know if he will run again, even if he can.
Oh, if he can is the big question here. Because
yes.
Of course, Trump's impeachment trial is said starting 2 weeks from this Monday. Senate's delayed so it can focus on confirming Biden's cabinet. I want to go around. Do we think, this is the final question today before we wrap up, do we think that Donald Trump is going to get impeached? We'll do it the other way around this time. Eden, we'll start with you.
Yeah, as much as I'd like him to, I don't think it will. I think it's quite improbable that he will. But it's sort of it is relevant, but I think in terms of like what you said about what he's going to do next, I think there's going to be more focus on what his children are going to actually do next. I think Ivanka Trump is looking at running for the Florida Senate seat, and I think much to Marco Rubio's demise, but I think it's quite interesting that I think he will go onto Trump TV. I think he will sort of focus on media, and that's what he does best, and that's where the money is. So I think that's his focus. And no, I don't think he will get impeached, because I think the political sort of mishaps of like his presidency, I say mishaps, sort of underestimates what he actually did, but I think what he actually has done is more likely to have an impact on the GOP, as Scott said, rather than his actual own individual sort of impeachment process.
Yeah. Arthur, what do you think?
I think contrary to a lot of the indignant hysteria, I think that Trump was actually very shell-shocked by the whole Capitol riot thing and the subsequent response from a lot of Republican officials. I don't think he premeditated it. I think his vote was like, oh, what have I done? Whoops. Because, so I think, honestly, I think he's, at the moment, I think the reason we haven't heard much from A, because his Twitter account was taken down, thank God, but B was because I think he genuinely doesn't have a clue. Because I think had this whole riot thing not happened, and a lot of Republican lawmakers hadn't been forced to take a kind of affirmative position on his aggressive tweets, I do think that Trump would have been kind of odds on to win the Republican nomination in 2024 had he run. But now in recent weeks we've seen high-ranking Republicans like Liz Cheney and John McConnell kind of break quite break quite substantively from the president. So I think that will pose a lot of trouble for him going into going to the next election. If he sought Republican nomination, I think him and a lot of his closest advisors are aware of that. So I think he's quite rattled. I honestly, it's too early to say what he does. I think he doesn't have any clue what he does now either. But I am suspicious of the idea he'll start a third party, because ultimately that involves a degree of effort and an attention span which I don't think he possesses, and neither do I think he has a sufficient infrastructure of individuals with the practical capacity to actually run that kind of organization. As we saw, the Trump administration was a nightmare because there are very few kind of competent administrators who actually shared his kind of ideological positions. More likely is he goes down the media route, gets a show on Newsmax or starts Trump TV and just kind of sits on the sidelines just spewing nothing whatsoever and causing a bit of a fuss and maybe provoking some backlash and kind of the liberal media ecosystem. But I think I suspect that he will take the easy route as he has always done. And I think the Capitol riots especially have drastically diminished the odds of him seeking the presidency again in 2024.
All right, Charlie.
Yeah, I agree with Arthur. I think the impeachment trial he's not going to end up being impeached. I don't see how he will. Checks and balances and the US government are always a bit dodgy in that. But he will definitely remain vocal as he can. Trump TV, I can see being a real possibility. Despite his Twitter being suspended and despite most of the world hating him, he has still got a very strong support base, which he will continue to keep feeding and poking the fires with, just to I don't know why, but just stay relevant, I guess. He will just keep twisting facts for his own perspectives. If I stayed president, this would have happened. If I did this would have happened. Biden's terrible. That seems to be more likely what he'll do, but I don't think he would run again for 2024, mainly because of the riots. I do think that has just erased all chance of him being president ever again.
Yeah. We sort of really asked you that, Scott. Let's go to you, Andrew.
I have an idea for what he should do, and obviously he's not going to do this because I'm just a uni student, but Trump, if you're watching this, take this into consideration. There was this thing that I think Richard Branson did where it was kind of like a reality TV show, and he pitted American people against each other, I think some survival thing, and whoever won got to be CEO of his company for a few months or something. That would be such a good show. Obviously, I think when Branson did it, it completely flopped, and he got a lot of backlash for it. But I think if he's going to do anything, he needs to do this kind of thing where whoever wins gets to be mock president of America or something. It would just be so funny to watch.
It's not I thought you were pitching the Hunger Games to me, and I was so confused. But also, Trump, if you're out there and you're watching Insight, please come on the show. I would love to have you. I'd love to give you an interview. I don't have a Twitter anymore. We can share your thoughts here, please. I'm I'm a lovely host. Everyone's having a good time. You have a good time. And with that, it's time to wrap up today's show. Thank you to all my panel. You've all been absolutely fantastic. Thank you everyone watching at home. We'll be back next week. But until then,